Hello there. I ran away from civilization. Well, to a point. And I'm back now. I've been on a long journey bicycling through forests and mountains, avoiding bigger cities, camping, eating from the finest dumpsters, and altogether avoided civilization as best as I could while still depending on it for survival. I'll be the first to admit I may have overreacted a little bit to Corona becoming a global pandemic. But around that time, my mind was like, if this virus does somehow cause civilization to collapse, the biggest danger was if it happened really quickly, and if that was going to happen, then that very moment was possibly the one chance I had to get the heck out of an urban death trap before the grocery stores suddenly stopped being able to get food deliveries and the poop would really hit the fan. But, as of this recording, the apocalypse hadn't come after all. Fuck. The food delivery didn't collapse, supermarkets, increasingly monopolized by larger and larger companies, using less and less farmers, still remained well stocked with a surplus of hegemonically distributed commercial foods. So I've returned to get back to work on these videos, and I can see that while civilization hasn't collapsed, it definitely seems like it's gotten a lot worse. Oh, Mary, oh, Martha, oh, Mary, ring them bells. Oh, Mary, oh, Martha, oh, Mary, ring them bells. I hear archangels a-rocking Jerusalem. I hear archangels a-ringing them bells. I hear archangels a-rocking Jerusalem. I hear archangels a-ringing them bells.
Members of the public are reminded to keep a safe distance of 6 feet from others while in public places to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. Please help us keep you safe.
This officer right here behind us just followed us in the store. You just video. He said we can't video, but he just told us we're on body cam. He just followed us from outside, told us that we cannot wear masks. We're being asked to leave for being safe.
Everybody cough in my face.
Prolonged lockdown, basically slavery.
Do you feel enslaved?
I do, because I can't go out.
Hamsters who still got infected, despite having a mask barrier, had less of the virus in their bodies compared to hamsters without masks.
Through the internet, I see some people complaining that folks are making the virus political, and I can understand this kind of complaint. It's important to recognize that in many ways the global corona outbreak will hold a lot of different kinds of trauma for a lot of different kinds of people. Of course, it can be a lot to ask for people to take on more than just their immediate problems. But imagine that Godzilla was attacking New York City. Now, Godzilla, of course, is not normally known for having a political agenda, and regardless, cannot be negotiated with. The government tries to attack it with everything they've got, but they're absolutely unable to stop it with force. So, 23,000 people die and hundreds of thousands are injured before Godzilla goes away to take a nap. Now, they know Godzilla will be back, but instead of doing anything new about the situation, like investing in more efficient medical and economic infrastructure, politicians and rich people just take advantage of the situation to pass a bunch of sketchy laws restricting people's privacy and travel more than ever while almost no one is paying attention. They could spend the money on getting the proper medical technology produced and making them accessible so that almost nobody has to die during this whole thing. But instead they spend that money on bombs and guns and face tracking cameras and border radars, and the people meanwhile just start arguing with each other over whether or not they should all be wearing helmets. Blaming each other instead of the national governments that they're paying taxes to, who aren't using that tax funds for buying and distributing the actual things that could almost save everybody's lives. Meanwhile, the villain from literally the worst pre-reboot Star Trek movie is announced to soon be the world's first trillionaire in a side plot that benefits absolutely no one. The metaphor is falling apart, but the most screwed up thing about this badly written tangent is that it's pretty much the world we actually live in. The giant monster is just invisible, and Jeff Bezos isn't actually Captain Picard's evil clone, unfortunately. Probably. So, anyway, yeah, maybe Corona doesn't have a political agenda, but the politics of the situation do drastically affect everyone. Politics is a lens for seeing beyond an immediate subject. It's a rendering of social and material implications. Regardless of whether you're paying attention to them, the politics of anything still exists. That means that everything is political. I'd like to acknowledge that already, my being able to ride my bike into a magical woodlands adventure was an absolutely absurd amount of privilege, and it's worth mentioning that some things have become more accessible for some folks, but that also should be looked at critically. Here's part of what someone struggling with a chronic illness had to say that I think is really worth thinking about. Something I've been finding difficult to process is actually how easy my life has suddenly become ever since we started the lockdown for Corona. I'm really enjoying how easy my life is now, and how many more opportunities I have in the Corona world, but it makes me feel angry, hurt, and upset, not only for myself, but for the whole disabled community. That suddenly, overnight, many of the things we have tirelessly fought for as a community have been seamlessly introduced. Don't get me wrong, it is really awesome that we have these things now. Suddenly the world is substantially more accessible to everyone, but the fact that this happened so quickly is literally because able-bodied people were also no longer able to go out. Many of these accessibilities are adaptations thought of by disabled people, asked for by disabled people, and denied to disabled people until now. You can read the rest of this post and more from the author at chronicallyillcat.com. That's cat with a K. You want to know something else interesting? Days, even weeks into my journey, all of the supermarkets I went into had no rice. And I couldn't help but wondering, there are roughly 7 billion people in the world, and I'm currently in Western Europe. Now, Western Europe is a loose grouping of some of the richest and most powerful economic entities in the world. And if I can't get rice here, what about the majority of people in the world who aren't in a relatively rich country? What about people who don't get the benefits of living and working comfortably within the broad shoulders of the undying Leviathan, which now plagues all of those who ever dare to be born to simply breathe upon this earth? That is, what about the people who aren't on the winning side of the global military-industrial complex? What I'm trying to say is, what about the people who can't do a quick bike ride over to some nearby supermarket and at least steal from it if they didn't make enough money playing music on the street that day to afford everything they wanted to get? Not that I would ever steal food. Stealing food when you're hungry is illegal, of course, and a totally good reason for police to violently put you in some kind of a box, which they will. And if you really think about it, that is pretty much all police are actually designed to be able to do on some fundamental level, right? Anyway, sorry, I'm really getting away from my point here. Hey, what about politics? Paying attention to politics might help you come to terms with the fact that whatever your personal version of normal was, there's a good chance that you're never going to see it again. Here are some speakers from an online panel of indigenous folks from around the world, speaking on environmental violence and the rights of indigenous people in the face of the coronavirus.
The Navajo Nation, per capita, after New York and New Jersey, is the most impacted population in the United States.
This is a life which the communities are now told to lead. They are told to keep only to their own space and not even move from one place to the other, and that is the life they have always been used to. It becomes very problematic for them. Even when it comes to food production, it has also gone down, and we are even fearing that because of the way some of the countries have blocked people movement, the shortage of food is also going to cause a lot of problem for the indigenous communities, and it has actually caused in some areas because nobody can reach them, and they cannot also come to the towns because there are restrictions that they cannot move. They cannot go without any masks on their wherever. And is that water available? Is it available for them? Some of them have still to walk far away.
President Julian Bearrunner is our second youngest president in our history. In his letter, I'm going to read an excerpt from it. Now, he's talking to South Dakota's Governor Kristi Noem. South Dakota is an invasive colonial settler state. But here's his letter to Governor Kristi Noem. Now you are threatening to dismantle checkpoints that my tribal nation has erected in the interest of protecting our community. At some point, the question must be asked, is your dominant concern the health and safety of South Dakotans or the commerce of business owners who use public highways in our state?
And now it's been 2 months that Puerto Rico has been in quarantine, but unfortunately people were still let in. People came in on boats, on ships, during tourism, and so that has affected our people greatly, and of course our communities.
We also have one of our own initiatives that we're trying to push forward, because as indigenous peoples are facing a situation that we expected, because for years our prior leaders have known that we need to change the way that things have been the way that the humanity has been carrying itself out, particularly in the urban centers. But the idea is for us to think as a whole, as everyone being one. So that's why we started focusing on our own autonomy and finding our own funding for different projects in our communities, and also to take back our own activities, not just in Brazil, but in the rest of Latin America and in our broader space for youth, for women, in which I also participate. So the idea is how we as indigenous peoples are participating within society at large. And when we come in, how are our voices heard? Because we depend nowadays on this capitalist system. I mean, we cannot have this false expectation that because we have our traditional ways that we wouldn't be hit by these foreign things. But the pandemic is an example of that we're not immune. Thus, we have to take back our communities. We have to take back our livelihoods, mainly because in our case specific, as youth, we analyze all of this and we look at this and we think that we are stuck with practices that don't belong to us, that don't allow us to change, don't allow us to grow. So when I hear others, okay, when we get back to normal, but the normal does not exist. So what we have to think is when all of this passes, where would indigenous peoples and our voices be said or established? So in terms of this pandemic, now we need to think about our role with all of this. That is not just for us to be working with each other. No, we need to be working with North-South relations. We need to think with Europe in how we can strengthen our voices with non-indigenous that are also close to us. Because we're going to be going through all of this, and we're going to have to go through all of it together. It's not a matter of selecting people. So Mother Nature sees us all as one, right? And that's all. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
A link in the comments can get you to more information about that webinar and others like it. Please check it out. I think it's very important. On that note, I'd like to conclude this video by saying I think we really need to be careful and pay attention to politics now more than ever. People not paying attention to politics is a large part of how the post 9/11 world got to the point that it is now, and also all of history. But speaking of 9/11, this might not have sunk in for a lot of people yet, but this virus is probably going to make the global effects of 9/11 seem tiny in comparison.
9/11 times 100. Jesus, that's...
Yes, 91,100.
Normal is dead. It was never alive to begin with, and it was more like a reanimated corpse. If nothing else, paying close attention to the politics of the current situation will help you prepare for what's going to happen next, and also for the next time a big virus outbreak happens, which it probably will. Let's face it, folks, we are in for a rough ride.
Hold on to your butts.
Until next time, I've got a report over half the year in the works coming soon that will also help you keep track of politics and how the situation got to the way that it is now. So please make sure you don't miss it by hitting that subscribe button. Share this video, please. Anything helps. Thank you to all of the Patreons who have supported this project so far. Capable, Kilgore Trout, Kalen, Albert, Frank, Zach. Those are the real MVPs, and if you want to join that list of wonderful people up there, just go to patreon.com/autonomousmedia. I really need the help. Anyway, be safe, stay dangerous, and as always, look out for each other.